Hey all, it's Linda. Welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I am so excited. This is something a bit new for my channel, a bit different, but I have been prepping and I am just pumped. But I do want to start by saying that I'm so excited to say that today's video is sponsored by LOOKFANTASTIC. LOOKFANTASTIC is Europe's #1 online retailer for beauty, and now they're coming to the US. What I think is really cool about them is that there's so many unique brands on there that I feel like you don't see on regular websites. You can't find them just on Target or Ulta or Sephora. There's so many brands that are just hard to find that are all in one place on here, and I think that's really freaking cool. Also, they have a ton of cruelty-free brands, so that made me really happy to see, of course. And in addition, their shipping is ridiculously fast, like creepy fast. My stuff shipped to me and was there like 3 days later. Like how? They're over there. They're overseas. How did that happen? So in today's video, I'm going to be using products from LOOKFANTASTIC. I did pick out 5 things to use and I've never used any of them, so these will be first impressions as well. But also they were kind enough to give me a discount code for all of you guys. So if you use the code 22Linda, you will get 22% off your whole purchase at LOOKFANTASTIC. And that's off your whole purchase, not just like one item like some other retailers do. So as you may know, June is Pride Month and LOOKFANTASTIC is doing an Equality for All campaign. They're featuring a ton of different influencers and I am so proud to be a part of this. But I do have to say, I am a straight cisgender woman and I wanted to see what exactly I could be contributing to this conversation, right? Because I do consider myself to be a hardcore ally of the LGBTQIA+ community, but at the same time, again, I'm a straight cis woman, so what can I contribute to the conversation? So this is what I decided I wanted to do. I have been going to Pride events since I was like 16 or 17 years old. First in Philly, like near where I grew up, and now I go to Baltimore or DC. It's my goal someday to go to New York Pride. But I've been going to those for a long time, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say that up until maybe about 10 years ago, I had no clue how Pride started, where Pride started, or why Pride started. I just knew it was there. I just knew there were Pride events, and I would attend them, and I would have fun, and I would support my friends. But at the same time, I didn't know the history behind it. So I figured that today I want to tell you all that story, and I'm going to be talking about the Stonewall riots. While I do that, I'm going to be putting on makeup at the same time and showing you some of the products that I got. But what I feel that Pride embodies is being the best, boldest, and kind of most authentic version of yourself. So I feel like a lot of people see Pride as a rainbow, which is fantastic. But for me, I see it as something a little bit different. I see it as just being a badass version of who you already are inside. So that's what I'm going to be creating. So strap yourself in, grab yourself a snack. Let's get into it. So first I want to talk about how and kind of why Pride started. After World War II, Senator Joseph McCarthy, he was famous for basically saying that everyone was a communist. He created a list of people that he deemed to be un-American, and gay men and lesbians were included on this list because they were considered to be susceptible to blackmail in case anyone outed them. Now, just between 1947 and 1950, 1,700 federal job applications were denied. Over 4,300 people were discharged from the military, and over 400 people were fired from their government jobs just for being suspected homosexuals. In the 50s and 60s, the FBI even kept lists of known homosexuals and made note of the bars and places where they frequented. Any bars that catered to gay men or lesbians were immediately shut down. On top of that, the people who went to these bars were exposed in the media. A lot of them were arrested, and then their picture would be put in the newspaper saying that they were homosexual. So they were straight up outed in the newspaper. I'm going in with my first product, and this is the Wander Beauty Nude Illusion Liquid Foundation. Now in New York City, Greenwich Village was home to a large gay and lesbian population. New York's mayor at the time, which was Robert F. Wagner Jr., made it part of his campaign that he was going to rid the city of all gay bars and restaurants because he was worried about the city's image for the upcoming 1964 World's Fair that was going to be taking place in New York City. Liquor licenses from gay bars were revoked, and undercover officers tried to entrap as many homosexual men as possible. They would buy them drinks, they would offer to take them on dates, and then they would arrest them because simply being gay was a crime back then. Because of this, very few establishments at all in the 50s and 60s would welcome gay people because, again, it was considered a crime. It was considered illegal. Now, there were places that did welcome gay people, and those places were often run by crime families due to the illegal nature of owning a bar that catered to gay people. The owners, managers, and bartenders of these clubs were rarely gay themselves. Now let's talk about the Stonewall Inn. The Stonewall Inn opened in 1930, then it was called Bonnie's Stonewall Inn, and it was a restaurant, and it was located on 7th Avenue South, but it later relocated to 51 and 53 Christopher Street. Now again, at the time, it was a restaurant and a bar, and it was fine until 1964 when the interior was completely destroyed by a fire. In 1966, the bar was purchased by the Genovese crime family with the intent to turn it into a gay bar. They knew there was money to be had there, and even though it was illegal, there was money to be had there. They couldn't have a liquor license there, but that didn't mean they didn't have liquor. So once a week, a police officer would come in and he would collect envelopes of cash known as payola, and this was basically so that they wouldn't shut the place down. The cops knew what was going on. The managers knew what was going on. They had an agreement so that the places wouldn't be shut down. The Stonewall became the only gay bar in New York City where dancing was allowed, and that was the main draw. The bar seemed to cater towards people who were really not welcome in many other establishments, even in other gay establishments. So you had homeless kids, you had drag queens, you had street kids, you had transgender people, you had the whole gamut, and a lot of these people, again, weren't welcomed everywhere, but the Stonewall Inn was a place where they could gather and they could feel safe and they could dance and just be who they were. So in the rear of the Stonewall, there was a smaller room that catered specifically to drag queens. I'm about to start doing my eye makeup, so I do want to say that today I'm going to be using the Illamasqua Artistry Movement palette. I am so excited. Like, these rich coppers, like, they have me feeling some kind of way. I really like the mix of colors in here. So you've got some purples, you've got a dark green, but these coppers though. And I'm also going to be using the Sigma E38 brush. This is my very first Sigma brush. Look at me. Now, police raids on gay bars were very, very frequent. Most of the time, the bar owners and the bartenders, they could be notified that these raids were going to happen. So they would be prepared, and right before they would happen, the lights would all come on, and this would basically signal to anyone in the club to kind of separate from each other, to stop dancing, to stop touching, to stop kissing, to stop whatever they were doing, because that's what the police raids were there for. But they were also there because, remember, these bars were not allowed to have liquor licenses. So if they had liquor, it was going to be confiscated. So what I think is actually kind of cool. A lot of these bars would have secret panels within the bar where they would hide extra alcohol just in case their alcohol was seized by the police. So that way, once the police left, they could be like, okay, open the panel and it just back to normal. They would even have somebody park a car down the street. The car would be filled with extra alcohol for the same reason. In case theirs got confiscated, they could just bring the car around back and keep the party going. Now, during a typical raid, customers would be lined up against the wall and they would all be asked to present ID. If you didn't have ID or if you were in full drag, you were arrested because cross-dressing was considered to be illegal. And this did work both ways. So if they saw a woman who was not wearing at least 3 feminine articles of clothing, she would also be arrested. Those who were not arrested were free to leave. So they would just go, and sometimes they would just go to a bar down the street and then they would come back, because a lot of times these raids would happen earlier in the evening. So they could go, they could come back, the night would continue. This brings us to the week of June 28th. So that week, police raids were getting a lot more frequent. 4 other bars in the Greenwich Village area were shut down completely, and the Stonewall itself had been raided a few times, but each of these times they were tipped off, they knew what was going to happen. On the night of June 27th, 1969, 4 plainclothes officers came in the bar, and they were there to just sort of scout and get some visual evidence that debauchery was going on inside the Stonewall. Now, while they were in there collecting their visual evidence, the Public Morale Squad, that was literally their name, okay, was waiting outside, waiting for the call that it was time to come in and break the whole thing up. Can you imagine being such a jerk in life that you're part of something called the Public Morale Squad? Using the bar's payphone, the 4 plainclothes officers that were inside called for backup. Also, I know there weren't cell phones at the time, so it's not like they could whip out their Motorola Razors over here or anything like that, but doesn't it seem extra douchey to use the bar's own phone to call for backup to come into the bar? I'm just saying. Now, the biggest thing about this is that on this day, the bar owners had not been tipped off that there was going to be any kind of a raid. There were some rumors circulating, but after looking into the rumors, they thought them to be false. So nobody was really prepared. Nobody was really even taking the rumors seriously. So they just weren't concerned about it. At 1:20 a.m. on June 28th, 1969, 4 plainclothes policemen, 2 patrol officers, a deputy, and a detective showed up at the front door and announced, "Police, we're taking the place." Immediately, the lights came on and the music stopped. But previously, when there would be a raid, people would be tipped off to it, so they knew what to expect. But this night, there were a lot of people in the bar who didn't know what a raid was. They were nervous and they completely panicked. So when this happened, a lot of them ran for the doors, they ran for the windows, they ran to escape, because you have to remember, at that time, being openly gay was considered to be a crime. So these people did not want to be arrested. They didn't want to be outed to their friends and family, and they tried to escape. But the police had barricaded the doors. The lights came on, the music completely stopped, and immediately the cops began to start to single out bar employees and anyone who they deemed as cross-dressers. They started their standard procedure. They started lining up people against the wall and asking everyone for ID. So again, because many people were not used to this kind of standard procedure, they were panicking, and a lot of them refused to give their identification. At that point, the cops basically decided that instead of processing everyone at the bar, they were going to call in patrol wagons to take everyone that was in the bar over to the police station. It would have to be done in several trips, but they decided that they were going to do it at the station rather than at the bar. Now, I was saying before that if you weren't arrested, you were fair to leave. You could just go ahead and go, and a lot of people would. They would just head out, and they maybe would go around the corner, and then they would come back later. But this time, people didn't immediately leave. They started gathering outside because they were pissed off. They had had enough, and they were gathering outside, and some were even, saluting the police or kind of laughing about it. But a crowd started to gather. People started to hear what was going on, and they started to gather from all sides. And many of them were homosexuals. Many were not, but many were. And they were just kind of interested in what was going on. Within minutes, about 100 to 150 people were congregated right outside of the bar. By the time the first patrol wagon arrived to take people to the station, it was said that the crowd, most of whom who were homosexual, had grown to about 10 times the size. Now, mafia members who owned the bar were the first to be taken away, and then the bar's regular club managers, the bartenders, any of the other employees of the bar. At this point, the hostility in the crowd kind of began to grow. Pennies were being thrown. I had a moment where I was like, why pennies? Quarters hurt way more. But then I heard that they were throwing the pennies while screaming, "Copper, copper, cops." I get it now. But they were throwing pennies, they were throwing beer bottles, and they were starting to get a little bit rowdy. And I feel like this happens often, but at this point, rumors started circulating within the crowd that people that were still inside the Stonewall were being beaten by cops. Then there was a woman that was being escorted to the patrol wagon in handcuffs, and she was screaming and she was cursing at the police officers that were taking her away. And then at one point, she screamed and shouted that her handcuffs were too tight. It was cutting off her circulation. And at that point, one of the police officers took their baton and hit her over the head with it. So at that point, the woman looks at the crowd and screams, "Why don't you guys do something?" And that was the exact moment that violence erupted. Real quick, I'm also going to be trying out this Illamasqua Iconic Chrome's pigment paint pot. And this just looks really beautiful. It's a beautiful chrome. 2 transgender women of color who were in the crowd, that was Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, were said to have been the ones that threw the first brick or stone or bottle. The reports are kind of unclear about that time, but I feel like Marsha P. Johnson is typically known as one of the people who started it. But at the same time, Marsha P. Johnson did say in later interviews that she didn't arrive until the uprising was already well underway. So it's really kind of hard to tell. So many people credit Marsha P. Johnson as being one of the first, but she herself says that she was not. Police at this point were trying to restrain the crowd, trying to get some semblance of control over them. And to do this, they were knocking people over, they were throwing people around, and the crowd kind of retaliated in that they slashed some police tires. They tried to flip over a police car, and things were just getting crazy. Several police officers, as well as a couple of handcuffed detainees, then barricaded themselves inside the Stonewall. And the crowd, they decided they wanted to get in. Some of them used a parking meter as a battering ram. Some of them threw bottles. The windows were broken. Basically, the Stonewall was destroyed at that point. The police tactical force came in and they decided that they were going to push the crowds back. They formed a line and they marched down the roads. We've seen this in recent times. And the crowd responded by forming a kick line. I'm not gonna lie, this is one of my favorite images of the whole thing. I'm just picturing the police pushing people back and going, move, move, and then there's the crowd over here like, dun, dun, da, 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 da. Completely non-violent, but pretty damn fabulous. By around 4 a.m., the streets had been mostly cleared. Thankfully, there were no deaths. There was no one even critically injured. There were a few minor injuries, but nothing horrible. By the next day, several news outlets, including the New York Times, the New York Post, and the Daily News, had all heard of the riots and started to report on them. That day, the Village Voice ran reports of the riots, and they started using several homophobic slurs like limp wrists. The New York Daily News ran an article with the headline, "Home Nest Raided. Queen Bees Are Stinging Mad." Because of this, people gathered again at Christopher Street that night. There was another explosive scene in the streets. People were mad. There were more tactical force police than ever. 5 people were arrested. This time, instead of just marching and kind of pushing the crowd back, the police used other tactics, such as tear gassing the crowd. Even over the next few days, crowds continued to gather, but there wasn't anything like those first 2 days. I forgot to put on my glitter. What is wrong with me? Now at this point, leaflets were being passed out among the crowd that said, "Get the mafia and cops out of gay bars." And they called for gay people to start owning their own bars, to own their own restaurants and not allow the mafia to take these over. A witness to the events around that time said, "The word is out. Christopher Street shall be liberated. The gays have had it with oppression." Now, they did not say the gays. They used a term that is a little bit more inflammatory, but the point was made. Now, this really started a sense of urgency. So people who had been oppressed for so long started to feel empowered. For my last item, I'm going to be using this Illamasqua Beyond Powder in the shade Dare. Look how gorgeous and metallic this is. Oh, God, this is so pretty. Within only 6 months of the riots, a ton of newspapers came out, including Gay Come Out and Gay Power, and within only a few months, they had amassed over 25,000 readers. 1 year later, on June 28, 1970, the anniversary of the riots was recognized with Christopher Street Liberation Day. And then there were simultaneous gay marches in both LA and Chicago. These were the first gay pride marches in history, and the one in New York City covered 51 street blocks from Christopher Street all the way to Central Park. By the next year, there were additional gay marches all over the country and the world in places like, and I need to read this list, Boston, Dallas, Milwaukee, London, Paris, West Berlin, and Stockholm. And then in the following years, other cities such as Atlanta, Buffalo, Detroit, DC, Miami, Minneapolis, Philly, and San Francisco followed suit. Within 2 years of the riots, there were gay rights groups in every city in America, as well as Canada, Australia, and Western Europe. Historian Lillian Faderman said, "The Stonewall Rebellion was crucial because it sounded the rally for that movement. It became an emblem of gay and lesbian power. By calling on the dramatic tactic of violent protest that was being used by other oppressed groups, the events at Stonewall implied that homosexuals had as much reason to be disaffected as they." Nowadays, attendance at LGBT pride events has grown substantially over the years. LGBT Pride Month occurs every June in the United States as an anniversary to kind of commemorate the riots. This is usually when most pride events are held in the United States. In 1999, then President Bill Clinton declared June to be Gay and Lesbian Pride Month, both in 1999 and in 2000. Then from 2009 to 2016, each year he was in office, then President Barack Obama declared June to be LGBT Pride Month. In June of 1999, 51 and 53 Christopher Street and the surrounding area were added to the National Register of Historic Places. This is the first place to be added to that registry that is of significance to the LGBT community. Assistant Secretary of the Department of the Interior, John Berry, said, "Let it forever be remembered that here, on this spot, men and women stood proud so that we may be who we are, may work where we will, live where we choose, and love whom our hearts desire." Gotta set it. So that is it. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I want to thank Look Fantastic so much for sponsoring this video and for working with me on this. I really enjoyed telling this story. I hope you all enjoyed it too. And I do also want to say that I will personally be making a donation this month to the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project helps to provide crisis intervention and suicide prevention for LGBTQIA+ community that is under the age of 25. So I'm going to leave all their info in the description box down below, as well as, of course, everything I used today. Please remember that if you go to Look Fantastic and you use the code 22Linda, you will receive 22% off your purchase. I really enjoyed doing this. I hope you guys liked this. Please let me know down below if you would like this to be a sort of series. I had this idea in mind where I would kind of go through and tell history of certain things that we might not know about. Maybe it's something as flippant as the history of lipstick, or maybe it's something a little bit more in depth like this. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you all so much for watching. If you're not already, I would love if you'd subscribe and become a part of the fam. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and hit the notification bell so you can be notified every time I post a new video. You all can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Those are all GlitterFallout. And as always, and forever, you are super freaking rock stars. I love you so much with my whole heart. Remember always, love is love. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.